Joining us today is someone who doesn't quite need an introduction. Some of you might have watched his movie and are familiar with his work because he's an award-winning Hollywood actor and director and celebrity favorite within luxury auctioneering internationally. With a strong background in acting, he first started his career studying acting at the prestigious acting school NIDA in Sydney, Australia, before landing a guest role on the hit TV show Home and Away. Since then, he has gone on to work alongside some of the best in Hollywood and has won multiple major awards. And a couple of recent honors include winner of Best Actor LA Film Awards 2022 and winner of Best Actor Beyond Hollywood International Film Festival 2022 and also the Best Audio Presenter at the 2021 iHollywood Film Festival. And his latest feature film, Malibu Crush, premieres worldwide this month that is directed and stars in. The film has already won over 21 major awards at film festivals in 2022. And he was also the 2019, 2020, and 2021 REB Australian Auctioneer of the Year winner. And he was the very first person in the world to auction real estate with cryptocurrency. So from living in the middle of a wheat field in the middle of outback Australia to being 2019 Australia's top 5 under 35, he's here today to share with you his best advice for success, how to thrive under pressure, and why your sphere of influence is everything. So ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming the man who doesn't need an introduction, the one and only movie star James Pratt.
Oh, that's a really nice introduction. Thank you for such a nice introduction.
You are so welcome. I'm so excited that you are here today, and I'm so honored. I'm so honored. I'm so excited to be able to sit down with you. And like I said, I have so many burning questions that I want to ask. But the first place that I want to start with you is to talk about your story, and your journey, and how did it lead you to where you are today. I'm sure it wasn't a smooth ride. So take us back to your childhood and tell us what was it like to grow up in the middle of outback Australia. And when you were a kid, did you like acting? When did you decide that you want to become an actor, or what influenced you to pursue a career as an actor?
It's funny because I didn't really get into acting or filmmaking or anything till I literally finished high school. And the first sort of I guess you could say wading into the water was attending acting school. And I think when you attend acting school, and you kind of audition to get in, they kind of can really see whether you have any experience or whether you're just really green and raw. I would definitely put myself as the most raw, maybe one play in high school with a small part as a tree or something I'd sort of done. There was really not a lot of credits. But I think where it kind of really was the benefit for me, I was very, very lucky. Obviously, getting to train at NIDA, which is a great school in Sydney. It has a good reputation in the world. That was probably a really good start for some foundations to kind of move into, taking them more seriously.
Okay. And so did you already know that you want to become an actor when you were young, or what inspired you?
I think you know what it was, growing up there really there wasn't much acting or having that sort of creative side. I was very heavily invested in playing sport and sometimes just having a good time with friends. So at that point where you finish school and people start asking you adult questions like, what do you want to do? And where do you see yourself? And the interesting thing was that at the time, my parents were like, look, if you want to go down this route, you also have to study something else to fall back on. It's just not one of those things where we are going to be thrilled if you say you want to be an actor and that's all. So I studied at NIDA, and at the same time, I also studied real estate and sort of got a diploma in real estate at the same time, which, looking back was great advice from my parents at the time. I didn't really like the advice at the time when they gave it to me because it was just so much more work. But looking back, it was terrific advice.
Awesome. And now, okay, let's talk about, because I want to go into your real estate business and career as well later. But let's focus on the acting part first. So what is the first thing that you do to research and approach a role?
So the process is usually you audition, and they don't usually give you the whole script or the whole, what they call is the whole, if it's a feature film, the whole script, or if a TV show, the whole episode. they usually just give you like a character breakdown. So it might be, let's just say if it's a drama film, emotionally shut in male, 30s, going bankrupt. Like that's like your bit of a character breakdown. So you realize the stakes are quite high. And then you make choices, with the script. And then as you start to audition and then obviously, meeting the director and they kind of give you their interpretation and you kind of, it's a collaborative effort then once you do it. The other way that, sometimes happens too is just if it's a feature film, you get a lot more lead-in time. So let's say, Joyan, you're playing a character of Joyan on the new Mission Impossible movie. There'll be months and months of preparation where you'll get time to rehearse and there'll be script changes and there'll be more rehearsals. So you really get a time to build the character up. Whereas TV, they shoot it very fast. So I love talking about this story, but I interviewed this guy called on Mogul Productions, and he was on the TV show Burn Notice, and he talks about his experience shooting Burn Notice. He's like, I auditioned on the Wednesday at like 3, 4 in the afternoon, and then I got the audition that night, and then they flew me out there the next morning at like 6, and I was on set 9 o'clock the next day. And it was like the script that he'd have rehearsed was completely different once he got to set because they'd sort of changed it. And that kind of shows you how fast TV moves, whereas feature films, you have such a nice lead in that you can really kind of feel more comfortable in the character and learn, all the lines and the changes and the beats.
Yeah. Wow. And how do you deal with that when they change the script, like on the spot? Like how do you adapt to that?
I think, what it starts with? It's your mental capacity to not freak out. Like, I think if you are calm, you can take in information so much more easily. So the first thing is, just breathe, have that opportunity where you don't sort of get overwhelmed and do the best you can. I mean, like at the end of the day, like if they give you like 5 new pages to learn in 15 minutes, it's not going to help if you suddenly are, hyperventilating saying, I can't do this, I can't do this. It's breathe, take it in, and, trust the moment.
Okay, so what was the last thing that you do before they say go? Like, when you're in front of the camera, like what was the last thing that you do?
That's such a good question because I find this really interesting because so one of the reasons you go to acting school is to give you basically a toolbox. And the toolbox is all these tools about how you would approach a scene. How would you, so instead of just rehearsing the lines and saying like, hi, how are you? You make choices like, what's the beat change? What's the objective? Why does my character want this? You make all these choices. And there's actually these techniques that you learn, like Stanislavski's a technique. And going to acting school, it teaches you how to break down a script. And one of the things is as you get more experience, you learn what works for you, what doesn't. And when I first studied, I had all these techniques and I'd spent all this time breaking down the script. And as, you spend more time on set, you kind of suddenly realize that, what I can do? I can actually, I don't need to do this to get peak performance, or you kind of find out what works for you. So for me, often what it is it's just doing some preparation work, but not heavy preparation work like I used to do. And then just being in the moment. So when the director yells action, you know what your objective is, but I'm not trying to remember every single action, every single beat change, every single transition in the thing, which, some people that works fantastic for them.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, I think as you go along, as you get more experiences, the more you don't really have to do all the hard work like you did in the beginning, I'm sure, when you first get into this industry, right? You want to make sure everything is perfect, that you remember every single line so you don't freak out, your mind doesn't go blank, right? And then you don't know what to do, right? So now you are also, you are involved in almost every aspect of filmmaking, and so be it producing or acting or directing. Which one do you like the most?
I think because I went to acting school, I've always loved acting, but I won't lie to you, directing is like a massive passion of mine. Really, that would be something in the future I'd love to do more of. and I've done a little bit. You know, I directed a documentary, and I directed Malibu Crush, and I've directed like a bunch of commercials, and you could say, you know, things that have got some good actors attached or working with some good people. But I think it's great to keep improving in yourself, like keep stretching, keep learning. And if anyone's wondering what is the best job on a movie set, like you cannot beat being an actor. Like you get overpaid, you get paid for sitting in your trailer. You kind of go out there, you do a couple of lines, and let's say you stuff up your lines. The editor will make you look good, and then when the movie comes out, you're a big hero, and it's very, you know, it's very rewarding. What I miss is when you're a director, you can actually get your hands dirty. You know, like if there's a problem, you know, on Monday night, the director's got to be able to solve that before shooting on Tuesday. And there's a lot more self-improvement, growth, and a lot more collaboration as a director. And that's where I really I love working hard. So there is times when you're an actor, you're just thinking, this is just too good. Like, you know, it's too much of an easy gig. Whereas directing is something that will push you and I guess you could say mold you and build you. And that's what I really enjoy about it.
Yeah, and I love that you just mentioned the movie that is going to be out very, very soon. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about the movie, the upcoming movie, Malibu Crush. Why is it going to surprise people about this show?
If anyone likes Dumb and Dumber, then they'll love this movie. It is literally Dumb and Dumber come to Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
And look, the interesting thing about it is, you know, originally I didn't want to wear so many hats in it, meaning being the writer, director, the actor. I originally, you know, I wrote it and I'd be like, I'd love to sort of play this role of Michael in it because it's sort of got a lot of, his character's obviously got a lot of, you know, stories based on what I've done. So COVID hits. And it's one of those sink or swim moments, whereas if we're going to make it, we're going to make it, but it's going to have to be very independent. And I'll have to wear a bunch of different hats. And there was obviously a director that we wanted, but we couldn't get him because of COVID. So it was just to get it done, I had to wear a few hats. And that was like, obviously, like, you know, the best thing about that is obviously like the growth that I sort of got to enjoy, as well as all the stress and all the fun that goes with shooting a movie. But it's a very funny comedy. It's about two guys that are in Los Angeles, have done nothing with their lives since high school. They have very low expectations on what success is. I think you can see that, like in the opening scene, like one of them's eating donuts on the couch and the other one's like spraying an old lady with a fire extinguisher. And they get this voicemail on their phone from like an ex-girlfriend of 2 weeks back in high school, so not really a proper girlfriend. And she's like, I'm getting married, and they actually think that that was for them, and they fly to Sydney to try and stop the wedding and I guess you could say rekindle old love with a lot of disaster along the way.
Yeah, actually, I saw the trailer, so I'm very excited. I'm so excited. It's so funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And so you mentioned about a couple of things that I'm just writing it down so that I don't forget to ask you later, because you talk about stress. That is one thing I want to talk to you about as well. And I think the other thing that I can't really remember. Okay, yeah, pandemic, COVID-19, right? So what have you done in the past 2 years when we were like the whole world shut down? How did you navigate through the challenges?
That was a really good time to grow, I think, during the pandemic. Originally, I was in I was in the US, and then obviously they sent everybody home from Australia to come back to Australia, and we were going into that lockdown period, and that was where it was sort of, for me, it was about writing, and then we got a little bit of a break to shoot Malibu Crush when they reopened again in Sydney, Australia. So we shot again, then they closed down again. And it was one of those things where, just navigating in the script. Originally we had, say, 20, 30 extras in one scene, but now by COVID laws, you can only have 12 people on set. How do we get around that? And the process was, it was just all about, I think, navigating, the ins and outs. But look, the really positive thing is that, COVID's gone now, as far as those restrictions are gone. And it's good to sort of look back and think, well, you did something during COVID rather than just sit, close the door and wait for the storm to go away.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Now let's talk about the stress, because not just COVID, right? I'm sure as an actor, as a director, you have to go through a lot of stress every single day. And I'm sure the industry, as we know, is also full of stress and pressure. And it's all under the spotlight. So what do you do to tackle the pressure that comes along with your fame and being a celebrity, being a public figure?
I think it's not easy, like as far as stress is stress. But I think it's just good to have like a life outside of work. And so you can really detach and put things into perspective. Easier said than done, but kind of the overall scheme of things, the world's already kind of tilting to be quite crazy at the moment. So putting things into perspective, what my stress is really not compared to the stress, over in another country or what other people have got going. So I think putting into perspective and also having a life outside to detach from and then kind of revisit work is always a good thing. Otherwise, you're kind of on that hamster wheel, just constantly stressed because you kind of live and breathe your work.
So what is your life outside of being a movie star?
My life. So I love surfing and swimming, playing sport. Have you been to Los Angeles?
Not yet.
If you go, or anyone listening, I would highly recommend hiking. Yes. That's certainly like a great passion of mine. Hiking Runyon Canyon, Laurel Canyon. Basically, Los Angeles has these hiking trails where you can hike up, right on sunrise or sunset, and you can just see right over the city.
I saw some of your pictures on Instagram. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There's a couple on there. Runyon Canyon. Yeah. That's just amazing to me. Like I just love that because physical exercise as well. But those are sort of some things I love to do. And then obviously, the regular things, seeing friends, riding skateboards, trying to be a kid still, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And so talk to us about how do you stand out? Because it's also for a competition, right? So what do you do to stand out and set yourself apart?
Within the film side?
Yes, within the industry, yes.
I think the best way to kind of navigate standing out is just hard work. People like hard work. People don't like complaint. In any business model, if you're hardworking, you'll get ahead because people recognize that. Whereas if you're always, cutting corners, I think you have sort of a short-term career because, it only goes so far. So hard work is a big thing. But also I think embracing who you are. I know like Hollywood's kind of got every single flavor under the sun. And I know, people go there and they speak to one person will say like, you have to do this. And you speak to another producer and they'll be like, oh, you should color your hair from blonde to brown if you're, often for women, or you should, basically kind of, this is your style, this is your role. I think basically embracing who you are, because people like you for who you are. It's when you're trying to be the next, hypothetical Tom Cruise or George Clooney or Ashton Kutcher, whoever it is, there's already one of those guys. But there's not one person of you. So just understanding that that's who you are, and obviously that combined with hard work, you'll definitely get there. But it's having that confidence in yourself too.
Yeah, I love that because so often we think about movie star, we think they are just like the character, the role they play in the movie, but we forget like who they really are as a person, right? So tell me about who are you? Like, who is James Pratt? Who is this guy?
I think just a hardworking, ambitious, fun guy. That's breaking it right down. I think those three things kind of go hand in hand. And like I said, I enjoy working. Like I enjoy the idea of the person I am today is going to be 5 times as good in 5 years, and even more perhaps if there's been challenges, rather than thinking, well, look, this is it, this is the peak. Life gives you things to kind of help you grow as you get older.
And now the next question that I want to ask is, because I was doing my research last night, and in one of your interviews, you mentioned some people need the escape more than others, and that is why we make art, right? I'm sure you remember that. And my question is, do you think life is always worse than a nice movie? That's why we need to escape.
I think people go in peaks and troughs. And I look at that, and just to kind of give you some perspective, I know the quote you're talking about.
Yeah,
Uh,
I love it, by the way.
what I guess where that was coming from is, I know for me, like I've lived in tiny country town in the middle of nowhere, and the isolation of feeling like you have nothing. Watching a movie, like, like watching a movie, there's a Paul Walker movie, Into the Blue. That's all water. He's diving, off the coast. It looked like off Miami in the movie. For someone out there who doesn't have a beach, who doesn't have a place to go diving, to kind of get away from reality, and have like an hour and a half away from whatever, drought or whatever it is, I think that's really important. Likewise with, if someone's in hospital and, they're sitting there, giving them something else to focus on and giving someone an escape, from what their reality is. And you're right. Like, there's so many terrible movies out there as well, where you'd go, my real life is so much better than this. But I think, people go up and down, and sometimes they do need that escape just to be able to kind of get away and I guess reflect and make them think, or just have a great laugh.
Yeah. So what is your intention when it comes to making a film or making a movie? What do you want to achieve?
Well, generally in Hollywood, everyone's like, I want to make money. Like, that's generally like the business model with everybody. But when you talk about art, I mean, my favorite films have always been, like Steven Spielberg or James Cameron or Catherine Bigelow or the Farley brothers, like, Dumb and Dumber, Shallow Hal, Point Break, films that you tend to want to see more than once. And so with those type of films, it's like, that's the same motivation, wanting to make something where people can enjoy it, they can watch it again. And it, like I said, it gives them something, joy watching it.
Yeah, I love that. And Find Joy is my podcast name, right? And
Right.
in my name as well. And because, this is what I find interesting, because when I watch a good movie, that I also find a hard time when it comes to an end. I find it hard to pull myself out of the movie because it's so good and I'm so obsessed with everything, right? That is right in front of my eyes. And how do you... And sometimes I don't even want to go back to my own lives, like what you just talked about. So how do we make sure we don't, when we come out of the movie set, the theater or the cinema, how do we take some of the lessons that we learn? Like, what are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves? Because I believe movie is not just for entertainment purposes, but it serves some meaning, right? It's like, it helps us to reflect on our own lives, like, or ask ourselves some of the better questions. So what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think the first question is, and I know the experience you're talking about, like there's those movies that literally suck you from your life into the movie, and then the credits roll and you're left thinking like,
what are they going to do now, right?
yeah, I want to go back into that world.
Yeah.
I think a really good question is to ask yourself, like, how does that make you feel? And identify that. Like, some people, it's like, it makes me feel emotional, or it makes me want to go and visit Italy. Like, what does it actually make you feel? And yeah, I think whenever that happens, it's a tremendous thing. But to be fair, I think everyone has their own tastes as well. Like, movies that I like, some people will be like, yeah, no, that's too immature for me, whatever. And other movies, I like, people be like, yeah. And I think that's the great thing. Everybody's got something, or their own niches and tastes, and everyone has, their own opportunity to watch what they like.
And now I want to ask another question, which is also quite, related to this question that I just asked. For yourself, right, being an actor, so how do you make sure that you don't bring the character that you played in the set, back to your home or with your family? How do you make sure that you return to yourself when when the director say cut?
Yeah, it's a good question, because especially with dramas, those techniques I was talking about, like, they do things like emotional recall, or, sense memory, where in order to play, and I gave the example as, an emotional shut-in, someone playing a character like that, might need to, you know, go back in their sort of, let's just say, sense memory and look at, okay, like when was a time that I felt, you know, emotionally vulnerable, too vulnerable to go outside, and, you know, to get into that state. And then when the director yells action, you're kind of already in that. So you're not putting like an on the surface reality TV show kind of like performance. When the director yells cut, it's really important that you do kind of have, like I mentioned, an escape, whether it's, for me, like I love going surfing or just getting outside whatever that character was and coming back into reality of what you want to do. Where you see like a lot of actors go overboard is because, you know, they play like a serial killer for, you know, 6 to 8 months on a movie, and then the director says, yeah, this has been fantastic shooting, we're going into post-production, and, you know, good luck on your next role or whatever it is. And that character, it's a process. They've got to work themselves out. So I think, to kind of sum up your question, look at it like, you know, like a balancing board. You know, when you're shooting, you're probably going to be like, you know, tipping the scales in this character. And then afterwards, just make sure you're tipping the scales back, just being back to normal, you know, like what you like doing, hanging out with your friends, and not getting too wrapped up in it.
Okay. So what is usually the first thing that you do after you're done shooting? Like, do you like meditate or like hang out with your friends or family? Like, what do you do?
Well, I mean, for me, like a lot of hiking in LA. Okay. You know, at the moment, excuse me, a lot of surfing, a lot of those type of things. But you know, everyone's different. You know, like sometimes you're still needed on the production when they yell, you know, they yell cut, and they're like, we've wrapped you for today, but we might have reshoots, so you're on standby. Or so it's sometimes that process of just like coming back into who you really are. Like you mentioned me those questions earlier, which were great. Like, who are you? You know, like if you love surfing, animals, and playing tennis, you know, that's how you'd sort of drag out of the character, go back into doing what you'd like to do.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for answering that question. And now let's talk about your other careers, right? Your other careers, your career as auctioneer, and also it's been incredibly successful, and you have a reputation for being one of the best in the world for auctioning celebrity and luxury homes. So I know now I know why you get into this industry, because of your, you know, your earlier start, you know, that you mentioned that you studied about real estate. So how did it actually, like, when did it start to happen? Like, how did you get into this industry?
And again, it was the same thing. It was when my parents they said, look, you know, you have to study 2 things. You have to be an act. If you want to be acting, you've got to have a real job. Like you've got to have something to fall back on. That's how much they believed in me. No, they were good. But basically, the auctioneering, I had this diploma that I'd studied, and my idea is, look, I'd finished acting school, and there was this job opportunity to work at a real estate office. And I actually thought I'd go in there, I'll work for like a month, and I'll kind of take a month's pay, because it pays more than getting like, you know, just an average job. And then I'll leave. And that way it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Like, yes, I can say I worked in real estate, and B, anyway, the first day there I worked in real estate. No intention of staying. The lady said, oh, there's like a upcoming NAC auctioneer competition. We're entering everybody in the office just to increase our chances of winning the first round. And of course, they're like, do you want to enter, James? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I did not want to enter. In fact, I was so sure I wasn't going to be there in like 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, yeah, absolutely. This is a good idea. So then turns like 3 weeks later, I was still there, and they had this auctioneer competition, which at the time was quite prestigious. I had no idea. Like, I didn't even like look at the invitation, and I won the competition, like that round. And they kind of like, you win this, you then go to the state and you do this other one. And anyway, I go right to the final, and I came runner up out of Australia with this NAC upcoming auctioneer competition. And the irony of the whole situation was, I always had in the back of my mind, like, I'm not going to need this. I don't really care. Look at this, like, acting and directing is so much more fun. And that attitude just made me stand out, because all the feedback was all the other auctioneers they're trying too hard, they're very fake, they're putting on a voice and things like that. And I had this like, who cares, whatever happens happens, but it just came across very, very natural. And it wasn't until I kind of came runner up that I was like, yeah, like I'm very immature. Like this is a real light bulb moment. Like I could actually have a career in this, and still be, going to LA and doing filmmaking. And that's when I started taking it really seriously. So it kind of took me a few rounds to recognize that I, was doing something okay.
Love that. So what is the secret of success?
I think hard work. And I think I heard a really good quote the other day from a friend of mine in Los Angeles who said, and it's one that people have said before, it's not his quote, but it was, if you put $10 in, you get $10 out. Yeah. And I think that goes for everything. Like if you put $100 in, you'll get $100 out. So if you're wanting to be hypothetically like the best merchant or the best trader, the Wall Street trader, but you're only living in a small town or a small area, you haven't gone to, Wall Street, or you're not working for a big hedge fund manager, or you're not putting yourself in a position, you're not going to get like, $1,000 out, like by just playing it safe wherever you are. I think, the more that you put yourself in a position to be successful is the more you're going to get out. But that also means stretching yourself. It's uncomfortable. It means taking risks, and it means sometimes giving up, a lot of sacrifices.
Okay. So now I want to talk about, because some of my listeners, they are listening, maybe they are not in a position where they can hang out with successful people, or they have the resources. So how do they start? Maybe they're thinking, yeah, but I'm living in this small town, in this, this small country. And what is the first step? What is the first thing that I need to do to start making my dreams a reality?
Well, I think it's the very first thing is recognizing your sphere of influence, and just having that sphere where, like, subconsciously your goals, your motivation, and what's acceptable and what's not is often determined by the people around you. So for example, like if 5 of your closest friends smoke and you don't, and then one day you decide to smoke, they're not going to turn around and say, whoa, don't smoke. It's like, that's okay. Like that's your sphere of influence where smoking's fine. And not saying smoking's good or bad. It's just more an example. But basically, the same thing with what your ambition level is. Like if you're around people that are kind of like, not really pushing in life, it's hard for then you to push. So I think my first thing is recognize your sphere of influence, understand that there's always a solution. Like right now with the internet, you can have a Zoom meeting with someone in San Francisco tomorrow if you want, and then Hong Kong the next day, and then, Dubai the next day. There's opportunities online for anything. The other thing is make a plan, which is what your goal is. So if your goal is to, like you said, like bigger things away from where you live, let's say small country town, have that as your goal, because there'll obviously be times when you'll be tempted to give up on that or be pushed away, or perhaps, things come up like, stress. But if you've still got something to kind of lean towards, it sort of affects your actions. Whereas if you're a bit wishy-washy and you're kind of like, yeah, I'd like to move one day, it's like, how many times have people said that? And then I want to write a book one day, or I'll write a book when I finally get round to it. It's like, well, there's no perfect time. Life gets more and more busy as you get older.
Yes, I love that. And yes, because the one day will never come. This is what I also say to my listeners sometimes. The one day will never come, right? How do you overcome failures? Because I'm sure it's not just about the highlight reels, right? You also have, I'm assuming, right? So how do you personally overcome failures in your life, in your careers?
I think what people should look at is like the bigger the obstacle, the bigger the triumph. Like I remember looking back, and I spoke with someone, a friend of mine, and he's done really, really well. Like he's very, very successful. And I remember we were kind of just having a chat one day, and he was talking about the biggest successes that he's had have always come directly after massive obstacles. And I think everyone can kind of look at that. So like often it's like the bigger the cliff that you've dropped off with some sort of stress or problem, the bigger then obviously the success that's coming, because it's the same thing. Like, if there was only a little bit of change, then there's only going to be a little bit of reward. But, big changes mean, big rewards.
What would you say to someone who keeps trying and trying and trying, but keeps failing and failing and failing, and they are about to give up? What would you say to them?
I think you got to keep going. I think you got to keep going regardless, because the alternative is to, live a life of mediocrity, or not just mediocrity, but more just live a life of regret, where it's like, I think, at least if you try something when you're older, you can say, hey, I tried, like I gave it everything, and I now know, or it's taken me to a better place, as opposed to just playing it safe and being bored out of your brain, thinking, this is not what I was made for. And if you, failure is where you learn. That's the best part. And I sometimes think too, like, I see it all the time in the film industry. Failure is often like as circumstantial. It's not actually you. It's just more, it's not the right time. And where you obviously make up for that is when you actually hit success, you've actually cut away a lot of your competition, because people have peeled back. Like, people have wanted to make a movie for 3 years, can't get the finance, and then they just let it slide. But if you're someone that's 3.5 years and get your movie done, not only have you got your movie done, but you've also cut away a lot of your competition as well, who've given up along the way. So it's about obviously the long haul.
Yeah, I love that. Just keep going, because there's this one of my favorite quotes says, to succeed, you just have to not fail once, just once, right?
Right.
And I think that is so true, right? That is so true. So now let's talk about, because I know you are also a founding member of Mogul Productions that you have mentioned throughout this conversation, the NFT company and the marketplace. So we all know that NFT is a game changer for the artists, designers, and the creatives. And now I think like more and more different industry, they are coming into this space, like banking, real estate. They are also using NFT. So since you're way more ahead in the industry, where do you see it going? Like, where do you see NFT market or trend in the next 5 years, and how is it going to change the world that we live in?
Well, it's funny, because when I first started talking with NFTs, this is like 3.5 years ago, I would say probably like 4 out of 5 people look at you like you're crazy.
Yes.
When you brought up NFTs, like this blank look, like, yep.
Well, when I buy a JPEG, right? For like
exactly. Yeah, like pyramid scheme, sure. Now it's very mainstream, and it's interesting because you look at different countries that have adopted it. I mean, Dubai, it's huge. You can buy and sell real estate with NFTs. In the US, people are buying houses. The biggest asset they own, they're buying in, in either NFTs and crypto. So it's kind of looking at, obviously, your question, like, where is it all going? It depends on the industry, but it's good to sort of separate the difference between, like, because sometimes people all like push it all into one. They're like cryptocurrency, blockchain, and NFTs. It's the same thing. They are different, obviously. NFTs, non-fungible tokens, are what I would say is the lowest hanging fruit you can add to your business to make much more revenue. It's easy to do. And a great example is let's say the movie industry. Let's say you have a really average short film, and you spent $15,000 to make it. It gets into 2 festivals. You have a little bit of a premiere, and you get applauded. Great, you did well at the festival, and then there's nothing. Like, it doesn't really go anywhere. The difference is now with an NFT is you can actually offer up that film for sale. Like, you could cut that film up into 5 or 6 different blocks and sell them as NFTs. You could do a poster, and you could say, hey, put it up on OpenSea. Here's a poster of my movie. You can collaborate with a really well-known artist to do a poster of your movie or a poster of the main characters. That's another revenue stream. The movie that I produced, we had like some extra scenes on the cutting room floor. They cut them up and they sold these deleted scenes as NFTs. And the deleted scenes made around 15% of the budget. So if you're thinking about from a business model, having an NFT to latch onto your business in some way, it just creates revenue. And just from what I've sort of seen, I mean, people have been very, very aggressive in big corporations, like, major companies over in the US, of just looking at their company going, hey, like, hypothetically, we're Coca-Cola or we're McDonald's. We do action figures in our Happy Meals. Why don't we do NFTs in our Happy Meals coming up? And that should project more income. So NFTs, I would definitely look at your business, or even if you're an artist or if you want to collaborate with an artist, there's room for it in anything you do.
Yeah, because it's still pretty new, I suppose, right? It's still pretty new. We are still in the very early phase of this whole trend, and I'm also learning about it. Learning about metaverse, NFT, and crypto, and I'm actually trying, to create my very first collection.
Oh,
And
good, good.
I see some of your, I went to your marketplace. It's incredible, right? Wow, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love it so much, and I'll drop all the links in the show note later for my listeners to take a look
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
So now the last question is, what is your best advice to embrace change in uncertain times like this? When COVID is still happening, war, like inflation, everything, and yet exciting times like this, where we are. So what are some of your best advice?
My best advice would probably be, you kind of put me on the spot there. Look, I think embrace the ride, like enjoy the ride, because you know what? There's so much good things going on right now. Like when you really put things into perspective, like we live in a world, like I said, where you can call up San Francisco tomorrow, you can call up Dubai, you can Skype someone if you need to, you can Zoom someone. There's so much you can do in this world. Perhaps if you're feeling like you're being really snowed under, perhaps it's just your perspective. Perhaps you're just waking up every day around the same people or the same four walls or the same kind of environment. And you just need to break out of that and realize that, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of really good things going on. And also, like, I mean, I have a friend of mine, and I've told this story before, but basically, this guy would wear the most oldest clothes. He lived with his parents till he was like 30. I do not know how he had a girlfriend for like 3 years, because he lived with his parents and his bedroom was like next to his parents in this very small house, and really great dude. And I just, he basically went from pushing and pushing and pushing to trying to do things. And I'd speak to him, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm speaking to, this guy who's like capital manager of this massive fund in the States. Like he would back himself to speak to these people on Zoom, and he sold his company for millions and millions and millions in Silicon Valley. But it was that first, like up until he's after he's 30, living at home, everything probably could have seemed terrible, but really what his sort of perspective was is, I'm investing in my future. This obviously is what I want to do, and it all sort of paid off. And I think that sort of motivation or that sort of mindset of not letting your circumstances get to you, and rather, backing yourself, enjoying it, is the way to live.
Okay, I know I mentioned that was the last question, but now I want to ask another question.
Well,
I just had so many. I just keep having questions for you. What motivates you?
I love the idea of self-improvement. Like I love the idea that, like, that's one of the reasons why you asked me about being a director. It's because if you're directing a film, it's a collaboration, which is, very, very rewarding. But if there's a massive challenge, it's like, imagine what you're going to be like when you overcome that challenge. It's like a cheat code. Like if you've solved 10 problems and that same problem arises again, you're a lion. You can take on that problem, no problem. But if you always run away from that one problem, and it's like you've only solved one problem, or you've kind of solved one out of one problem, it's like your confidence level is down. You can't embrace that. And I think that's where you can really thrive. If you can get used to performing at a really high level when you're uncomfortable, I think you will absolutely dominate your competition.
I love that. Before we move on to the final part of the podcast, is there anything that you really want to talk about, really want to share? Perhaps I didn't ask you or didn't let you.
I've just really enjoyed your questions. They've been excellent. Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we had this conversation. I'm learning so much from you. And thank you so much for, again, taking your time out before you fly to Canada and later, and sharing your life journey with us, sharing your passion, your experience in Hollywood with me and my listeners today. And now we're going to end with we still have 5 more questions. This is the final 5 rapid fire questions that I always ask my guests. But I always ask my guests the same questions at the end of the show, but I have changed them for you today. So I have different...
Harder or easier for me?
Yes, I have a special question for you today. So every question has to be answered in 1 word or 1 sentence maximum.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready, yes.
The first question for you is, what is the best advice anyone has ever given you about acting?
That's really the best advice. This is not going to be one sentence. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure, no worries.
Okay, well, there was an acting teacher that had been a very successful actor. He'd worked with Steven Spielberg a lot. And one day he came in right before I finished acting school and he said, listen, if you crack a big Hollywood movie, it doesn't matter how you act, they'll fix it in post. They get 15 angles. The editor can dub your voice. They can do reverse angles. They can cut to the wide. So don't worry. That was the best advice because it just meant that when I graduated, I was like, oh, so that person that's really stressing out, it's all going to be okay. If you like, it was something nice that took the pressure off. I always remember it.
I love that. I love that. I wasn't expecting it. The second question is, what is the worst advice anyone has ever given you about acting?
I think the worst advice is there's been some bad advice for actors in Australia where they've just said, don't go to Los Angeles or, it's too competitive over there. Often people in the Australian industry, big fish, small pond, often people here don't want people to leave and go on to something better. And I have found from time to time there's people in the industry here that kind of put Hollywood down. My advice is Hollywood's that if you go there, it's easier to make it than any other place in the world just because there's so much opportunity. So that would be something I would say, because I have seen a lot of people come to me and say, oh, like I'm not going to LA because, so-and-so said, I should stay here for another 3 years and do this. And I think in my mind, I'm thinking, that's crazy talk. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The next question is, if your life is a movie, what would be the title of the movie? I'm sure you have thought of that, no?
Depends what day it is. But when I was younger, it was definitely Dumb and Dumber. Growing up, yeah.
Okay, so that was the answer.
Yeah, let's go with that for now. That gives me some room to be less mature.
Sure. Now the next question is, if you could live your life all over again, what would you do differently?
Less stress. Embrace change and get used to being performing when it's uncomfortable much sooner.
I love that. And the last question is, what is your definition of success?
I think success is when you get a feeling inside that you've accomplished whatever the goal is inside, and it's been enough to bring about a change in you. So if there's no change from whatever you've accomplished, it's obviously not much of a success.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. Because so often we think we have to get this or that, like we have to get there or we have to achieve this, then we will feel happy. Then we will feel like, I'm good enough. I'm worthy of success, right? But it's not really the case. So many people, they are chasing after, all these titles, all these, like cars and houses. And when they get there, they realize, holy shit, this doesn't make me happy. Especially in the entertainment industry, I'm sure it's quite sad to see that, to know that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah. And thank you so much for answering all my questions. And so tell my listeners, where is the best place to find you online?
Probably the best thing is social media, Instagram, James Pratt 7. Twitter is James Pratt 7. You can have a look at some of my movies on IMDb, just under my name. I think there's some stuff up on YouTube. Sing out anytime, anyone that's listening, if you want to kind of connect or if there's any questions, love to chat. And thank you very much for the interview too. It's been great questions. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you. And what are you currently working on right now? What is next for you?
I briefly mentioned to you just before we came live, I have this epic travel schedule, Toronto International Film Festival, Futurist Conference, a couple of movie premieres, a couple of movie festivals. Once all that settled down, shooting a TV series halfway through September, And fingers crossed, but it's looking like I'll be able to direct the end of this year, brand new film, which is really passion project for me, which November, it's slated for November, which I'm really excited about. So excited about the change, the challenges, again, like I said, being a director, really excited about the challenges coming up.
I love that. And I can see how excited you are when you talk about it. And maybe we can have you back on the show again. And who knows, right? If you have the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Right? Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love that. All right, guys, I am sure you love this episode. Go follow James. Go watch the movie when it's out, and I'll put all his links in the show note below. So check out all the amazing things that he is doing. And if you're not following me, follow me on Instagram at joyan.chant and tell me, okay, please take a screenshot of this episode and share your IG stories and tag me and tag James and let us know what is your biggest takeaway or your favorite James moment from these episodes. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And I will always leave you the same way as I leave you with every other episode. Show up. The world needs you and you need you. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all a joyful and amazing day ahead.